want to turn now to our reporter roundtable. Peggy Noonan is a columnist for the Wall Street Journal and a CBS News contributor. Robert Costa reports for the Washington Post. We're also joined by Washington Post columnist Ruth Marcus and Mark Halperin of Bloomberg Politics. I want to start with you, Mark. What did you make of Hillary Clinton's event yesterday, whatever we may call it?
Well, you know, in the Clinton family, they used to say the era of big government is over. That speech was about a lot of new big government, and clearly is intended to lay down a platform that plays to her strength. We heard, I'd say the most positive thing you could say is what she talked about yesterday is what she believes in. That's the kind of president she wants to be. And it certainly is, to some extent, with an eye towards Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley and what is going to be a bumpy nomination fight. I think the question is, does she have an eye now on the general election where Republicans see her as formidable? But I didn't hear a lot in there yesterday that I think is a clear general election platform. Our strongest presidential candidates, when they announce, give a speech that they could give at their convention and in their inauguration. I'm not sure that speech is going to carry over for her.
Ruth, put this speech in context for us.
Well, a couple things. First, I rarely disagree with Mark, but I'm going to disagree with him here because I don't think that Hillary Clinton said very much yesterday that would not go over well with the general election electorate. And I thought she accomplished a lot of things in this speech. She set out a grand vision of why she wants to run to be the tenacious fighter that we heard from Robbie Mook. She put some specific policy pieces with that. She showed she could take it to the Republicans. She played the gender card, and I mean that in a positive way, talking about her prospect as the first woman president. And she added a piece of biography that I think could be appealing to people.
Talking about her mother.
It polls well. It polls, the thing she talked about would poll well with the general election audience. I don't think that overarching message is one that is a bunch of new programs. Most of what she talked about is a bunch of old programs.
Old programs that poll well might do well, and actually I think we will see some new things. You know, we're talking about, for example, college debt. I just want to make one quickie point, which is that where I would fault the speech is that it didn't happen 2 months ago, and there was a lot of opportunity costs in those last 2 months. You talked to Robbie about the trust issue. I'll let others talk. But I think that there was really some cost in the last few months.
But Peggy, if Hillary Clinton had started with that kind of a grand attempt to lift off, wouldn't people have said, well, she thinks it's going to be a coronation, so this is a coronation-like event? I mean, that's what they were worried about.
I don't think so. I thought the speech yesterday was a concession in a way that she understood that she can't run, as perhaps she had hoped, as the lady on the floral print couch in the room with important lighting, saying, I want to be your champion and I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to nod. This is a listening tour. That was a campaign speech. That sort of conceded, oh, I guess I got to go out. I guess I got to hit the hustings. I guess I got to make the points. I think it probably, the whole speech did no harm for Mrs. Clinton. I'm not sure it did deep good. It seemed to me to highlight some of her weaknesses as a campaigner. There is a rote quality to her speeches, a certain leaden quality. Even the audience, to me, looked a little bit rote. They applauded at the right moment after the line that was delivered with perhaps an incorrect emphasis. Do you know what I mean? It's some kind of funny.
There was something, Robert, what did you see in terms of Republicans looking at this speech? Are they worried? Is there anything there that puts them on the defensive?
Well, Mark and I were out at the Mitt Romney retreat in Utah, and our sense from talking to Republicans there, as they look at Clinton, they think she's sending the right cues to progressives and that she has a strong economic message, and they're going to have to combat that if she's the nominee. But at the same time, they still think she's vulnerable on the email server, on the foundation, and they don't think she yet has a counter to their attacks, which they assure us are coming. And they also said a challenge for her is she had a big speech. It was a scene at Roosevelt Island that was impressive, but they think her strength actually in the last 2 months was having meetings with voters, was going to coffee shops, toning down her status as a global celebrity.
She's so formidable because a Democrat is going to start with a lot of electoral votes. A lot of the speech's high points yesterday were appealing to the coalition of the ascendant that Republicans have not cracked the code on. Out in Utah and talking to Republicans around the country, that's what they need. They need a way to have an economic message that appeals to the coalition of the ascendant. Hillary Clinton, as Ruth suggested, so strong on that point. Until they crack the code on that and find a nominee who can take her on, she's formidable.
Ruth, on the question of trust, Robbie Mook challenged the idea that voters have trust questions about Hillary Clinton. The polling seems to show that they question whether she's honest and trustworthy. Does that matter? Is he right? Is it more important that she be a fighter for regular people and trust is an esoteric question?
Well, all of it matters, and because there's two things that matter for voters in addition to whether they agree with candidates' policy positions. One is whether they can trust you to, I mean, the Clinton campaign wants to reframe the trust question as not trust you to, in trustworthy sense, but trust you to fight for them. But they have to also trust you that you are who you say you are. They also need to be convinced, and this is why she did the biography yesterday, that they can live with you for 4 years or 8 years, that they can tolerate you. I think that when you see the campaign reframing the trust issue to trust that you will fight for them, you see the toll that the last few months has taken. As she has been quietly listening to voters, that's been taken up by two things. It's been taken up by seemingly incessant stories about speeches and the foundation, and the air has been occupied by mostly Bernie Sanders, and who has done a very good job of prodding her to take clearer positions on things.
And he was prodding today. Peggy, I want to ask you about this biography, talking about the mother with Hillary Clinton. It's an attempt to make a three-dimensional candidate here. Is that possible with somebody who's been in our public life so much? Does one get a second act that you can introduce with a big speech like this, having been a speechwriter?
Let me just pick up on something that you said, Ruth. I agree with everything you said, and I'd only add, man, this part about meeting with the press has been, I think, very difficult for her and a loss to her, and she ought to be meeting, should have met with them yesterday, I think. I'm sorry I lost your question.
No, does the biography, how much does biography help a candidate we know so much?
I think it's just fine. There was a sense that a lot of the speech was going to be taken up on the story, a very pained and yet triumphant story of her mother. It wasn't a lot of the speech, it was some of the speech. I kind of read that as Mrs. Clinton subtly saying, I know you all think I'm rich and I'm successful and I came from success, but actually I came from a background that may have been somewhat like yours, with parents who had real problems. I thought that's what she was trying to do. I thought it worked fine. I mean, there's nothing bad about that.
Robert, what do you make of Bernie Sanders making those clear distinctions with Hillary Clinton today? He'd been shy about that before.
I mean, we saw Secretary Clinton reference her mother, but on that stage was former President Bill Clinton. I met with students this week from the University of Pennsylvania and University of Southern California, and they tell me there is real energy for Senator Sanders on college campuses because they see Sanders speaks for someone who's anti-establishment, and they want to see that kind of message from Hillary Clinton. Robbie Mook says Clinton's ready to be that fighter, but they see in Sanders someone who's a natural in that role.
The Clintons always focus on the next election. That's like what they do because it's smart. The next election for her is not the general election. It's defeating Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley. And I thought Bernie Sanders with you did what he's been doing lately, which is he's become an optimistic candidate. And being a progressive with an optimistic message is powerful against her because she sometimes struggles to be optimistic. And obviously these progressive issues like trade, like Keystone, are bedeviling her right now.
And I think that I wanted to pick up on trade because this is a very fascinating thing, and I think we need to just call the campaign to task a little bit. The notion that last week's vote and the coming revote, if it happens this week, on trade adjustment assistance and the fast track, which is help for workers, and on the fast track authority, that would give not just this president but the next president the ability to do trade negotiations. The notion that this is some kind of very minor procedural inside the beltway, inside Congress, why would she ever weigh in on that step? I think the technical trade term for that is it's a crock. It's a really important question. Certainly unions know enough about the agreement to know how they feel about it. Other members of Congress know. Bernie Sanders is appropriately calling on her to take a position, and so should we. It may be smart for her not to.
The Clinton campaign is making a big bet, which they have, I believe, total consensus on, which is shows like this can talk about her not taking a position. Shows like this can talk about her email server and the foundation. Their bet is the press will eventually lose some interest. Voters don't care. The Republicans will waste their time going after these issues. That's their bet. Against the right Republican, it's a good bet.
We're going to switch and talk about those Republicans in a moment. We'll be right back with our panel.